Hello and welcome. This is video number 3 in a three-part series about fascism. And in today's video, we're going to take a look at how Hitler and the Nazis actually gained legitimate power in Germany and then what it looked like once they got into a position of power and authority. Hope you find it helpful and informative. Let's get started. Now, one of the strange things in this process of Hitler and the Nazis gaining power in Germany was that as the 1920s went along, because basically Hitler was jailed in 1923, he got out in 1924, went back to trying to run things for the Nazi Party. They really didn't get that much support as the 20s went by, and the main reason for that was that conditions in Germany got better. You might recall we talked about the hyperinflation of the early 1920s in Germany. That was a rough time, but things got better. And when things got better, people saw Hitler and the Nazis as kind of just this fringe edge group of people that kind of had some ideas that maybe made sense, but overall they were kind of crazy. When the Great Depression hit and conditions got bad and people were out of work, people were open then to hearing from somebody who promised great things, even if they maybe were a little bit on the kooky side. So one thing you could argue is that had there never been a economic depression in Germany, it's unlikely that we would know much more about Hitler and the Nazis other than that they were this small little political group in Germany during the 1920s. And so as conditions get bad and the Nazi Party gains support, Hitler ends up having the opportunity to become a legitimate leader for Germany. One thing to know about the Nazis, they were a political party, just like any other political party in Germany at this time. And Germany had a multi-party political system, so there were lots and lots of different political parties, and the amount of support that they had varied. Now, in the German parliament, it basically operated, kind of think our U.S. Congress, that elections would be held, people would be elected, representing all the different political parties, and then based on how much of your political party was represented, would have a lot to do with how much of a voice you would have in that parliament. And getting into 1932, the number of people being elected as Nazi Party officials was growing, so they definitely had some support and had some voice. Not a majority by any stretch, but were definitely relevant. And that led to Hitler being named Chancellor, which was not the top position in the German government, but very high up in the German government. And the reason for that was there was a thinking by those that were also in power positions within Germany that Hitler was dangerous and that if he was on the outside, they couldn't control him, and that who knows what might happen with him then. But if he was on the inside, they could control him, and that way some of his craziest ideas wouldn't be able to go anywhere. And so President Hindenburg at the time did name him to be chancellor. And so one thing to note, Hitler was in a legitimate position of power in Germany, perfectly legally, following it the way the system was supposed to work. Now, it would turn out to be a major miscalculation, but he was definitely in power legitimately. So when you think about other world leaders choosing to interact with Hitler, there's a rationality behind that because he was a legitimate leader in that country. Now, as time went by, shortly after he was named chancellor, he would take advantage of a strange set of circumstances to assume total control of the country. The German parliament building, the Reichstag building, burned down mysteriously. Communists were the ones who were blamed for burning it down, although it's quite clear that it was Nazi people that burned it down to create the beginnings of a crisis situation. And out of that crisis type situation, Hitler was able to use the system that he was now a part of to gain dictatorial powers, basically emergency powers that were meant to give him greater authority to make decisions until the crisis was over. The problem would be that the crisis wouldn't ever be over, and Hitler would never let go of those dictatorial powers. It's really from this point, with Hitler as chancellor, with constitutionally legal dictatorial powers, that he begins to control Germany and kind of set it up as his own version of a fascist, totalitarian type place. And so he did a lot of the things you see done in totalitarian type regimes, which is to try to control everything, especially information. So whether it was the press, the radio, any kind of communication, had to put out what he wanted put out, and that's all there was to it. And it's amazing how influential it can be if there's only one message getting out to the people. I mean, you only have an opportunity to know what you have a chance to know, and so he definitely took advantage of that, and that was a big influence on people. And with that, anybody that sought to put out any kind of information to resist him or go against him faced significant consequences. And within the first year or so of using these extraordinary emergency powers, opposition would be definitely put in its place in such a way that the people in Germany recognized this was not a group, this was not a man to go against. And also in these types of places, working with the young people is a big part of trying to build the country the way the leader wants it to be. And so programs for young people were meant to indoctrinate young people into the views of the Nazis and into Hitler's ideology. For the boys, it was the Hitler Youth. For the girls, it was the League of German Girls. I always kind of think of it as like the super crazy intense version of Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. And through these programs, kids grew up with all that they really had a chance to know was what the Nazis believed and what Hitler believed. And so even though we might look back on it now and go, wow, how could they think like that? It's important to remember, especially the young people that grew up during this time, that's all they knew. That is simply all they knew, and had no reason to believe any differently than what they were told. And then last thing for today, and we are definitely going to talk more about this when we get to the Holocaust years with World War II, but Jews in particular were a major target early on and throughout the time that Hitler and the Nazis were in power. That the Jews were simply blamed for Germany's problems. And one of the things you see happen in Germany is Jews going from being, full-fledged German citizens, all the same rights and responsibilities as anybody else, to being an outcast group and a group that would lose their rights over time, and eventually many of them would lose their lives. But we'll talk more about that when we get to the Holocaust years. And that's where I'll leave it with this topic of fascism, specifically as it related to Germany with Hitler and the Nazis. Hopefully you found this good information that's helpful to you. Thanks for watching.